Hi guys, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria, with another point about Tulwars. All joking aside though, I am going to talk about a recent acquisition of mine, which is this supposed Tulwar. Now I say supposed because I have no maker's mark on this guy, I have no idea where it came from. I got it secondhand from a SCA lifer who, ironically, recently passed away, and they were auctioning off his various collections of books and some swords. And I spotted this guy, and I thought, hey, 50 bucks, why not? Antique Tulwars are not terribly rare from what I have researched, especially because they were continuing to be made well into the 20th century, and so it is fully possible that this is an antique. It could also be, as I'm actually suspecting that it might be an antique hilt with a newer blade put on it, but either way, it allows me to experiment around with the unique grip and cutting feel that a Tulwar leads to, and furthermore, it gives me a good example piece to show in my new backsword and bayonet class as to what some of the weapons that the various imperial soldiers, by that I mean the British Empire, were coming up against. So, first things first, let's talk about what a Tulwar is, and if you're more fascinated with Tulwars, go watch Matt Easton's videos of Schola Gladiatoria. He is much more knowledgeable on this subject. I watched quite a few of his videos actually, and he can go much more into detail. But basically, a Tulwar is a sword from the subcontinent of India, and they're characterized by being curved like this, and they have a very unique grip. So we have, some have a knuckle bow, some do not, but they've got a relatively small crossguard. They've got these reinforcements coming out here on either side of the blade, and they do not actually touch the blade. They, if you can see right there, they just come up along each side of it. And they have this unique disc pommel, usually with a spike, or sometimes it has an extra little bit on the end. But what this means is that when I grip it, my hand pretty much locks in place. Now, that's very comfortable, actually, and it's kind of like putting your hand into a basket hilt, but due to the disc pommel, it leads to some interesting changes to my cutting mechanics. So, my natural inclination when I cut is to extend at the end. This is pretty much universal in all Western style cutting that I've come across. But if I do that with the disc pommel, this digs in right here and it's not terribly comfortable. Now, I can still extend out a little bit, I just can't relax my fingers, so I'm cutting and extending with the wrist instead, which gives plenty of reach with the blade, just not as much as I would normally expect. Now, with the curved cutting nature of this, it doesn't really matter. It's still getting plenty of reach, it's still getting plenty of velocity, and from what I've seen of practitioners of the still surviving, though a little bit more performance-y now, as most martial arts go, Sikh use of these, they are keeping it relatively close to the body. So rather than reaching out with these cuts, they're keeping it relatively close and just doing continuous cuts and then the thrusts. Now, from the accounts that Matt Easton's talked about, the thrusts with the Tulwar are pretty rare, and most British accounts say that that practitioners were weak against the thrust because they didn't encounter it a lot. But I saw in a couple different plays, let's say, the idea of stepping on a thrust like this. And so I've been playing around with it, and that angling with a curved blade is actually a surprisingly accurate thrust. Thrusting up here is kind of a little bit trickier because you've got to angle it down a bit more. Thrusting from the outside is really quite difficult to hit a target consistently. Maybe I just suck at it, but this inside thrust is quite easy to do and leads to a very good kind of stepping out, almost Duplirin-like mechanic, which can be followed up by covering. But apart from that, like I said, I have no idea if this is in fact an antique or if it's a later period blade put onto an antique hilt. It's certainly very solid, and I will make good use out of this. It's fun to play around with. One of the reasons that I think this blade might be later is, one, it's in very, very good condition. It has some rust spots that I'm going to clean up, but it's just, it doesn't look quite like it matches with the hilt. The hilt also has just a little, let's see if I can get the camera to see it, a little bit of splitting right there and on the back as well, and it doesn't quite line up with the blade, which makes me suspect that quite possibly this was a later blade just shoved into this hilt or otherwise affixed. Another thing is that the back of this blade has a pronounced short edge. Now, I looked at quite a few Tulwars, as many as I could see, and I didn't see many of, or any really, that had this. What you do see with this is kilij, or kilaj. I'm really not sure how to say it, but it is a Romanian or Turkish blade. So it's fully possible that somebody had this laying around, had a more modernly produced kilij blade and just shoved them together, or it's fully possible that this was put together. Now, it can definitely hold an edge, and from the people that auctioned off to me, they said that they suspected he ground this down, the original owner, to use it safely. It could certainly put an edge back onto it, and I haven't decided yet. If it is indeed a newer blade, then I don't really care to put an edge. I mean, I won't mind putting an edge back on it, but just feeling it and kind of gently cutting with it, it is quite ready to cut. A lot of the weight is kind of right here in this thickish spine, and it just flows. The only other really interesting detail that I've come across from playing around with this thing is that, and this is just kind of something interesting to notice, if you've seen any of Roland Dvořák's videos, he talks about how, I can't remember if he talks about it in a video or an article, but anyway, he has a bit of research onto the wheel pommels on arming swords. Some of them have actually turned inward to the left slightly, which kind of makes you think, the reason being is that the hand pushing against it and the pressure being applied to it has slowly but surely moved the pommel a little bit in place. Now, this actually has that as well. As you can see, the disc pommel is not even, which if I hold it right-handed, fits with where it hits me. Hold it lefty, it actually digs in a little bit more. So, could be that the hilt has moved over time. Can't tell if that was from modern use, can't tell if that was from historical use, can't tell if that was just the guy who made it wasn't necessarily all that talented at making things symmetrical. But, either way, that is a little bit about my no Tulwar. I will see if I can find out more about it and report back as soon as I do. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll show you some other strange swords another time.